And we are live. Data Storytellers. Today on the show, I have with me Shreenivasa Rajanala from Bayer. He is the VP and global head of data science and advanced analytics for markets and customer powerhouse. Srini, it's great to have you on the show.
Good to be here, Lazio.
Fantastic. So today, we will talk about all things data. I obviously want to pick your brain on where the industry is going and your take on aligning a global organization. But before we do that, would you mind just giving a short introduction on your journey? You've been with Bayer for over 5 years. What attracted you to Bayer and how did you join them?
Sure. I've had an interesting journey. So I graduated as an engineer when I was back in India, and I had my own gig that I was running after engineering, and then I wanted to get into consulting and experience many different industries. That's how I joined an analytics consulting firm back in India. I moved to US, worked across the East Coast, like ran East Coast operations for them across multiple clients. So I had a variety of clients that I used to work with: healthcare, life sciences, financial services, consumer packaged goods. So all of these industries actually helped me understand what kind of problems are we trying to solve as a business, and where do people make use of data. Basically, analytics, data science, different terms, but essentially trying to make sense of data. That's the journey that most of these companies were on, and we were helping them get better use of the data that they had. And as I went along that process, it was interesting to see how companies scale this globally. And I wanted to take the plunge and do things internally with the company. And then I was exploring a few options. Bayer, back when I joined them, was very much at the beginning of that transformation. Globally, they had a pretty strong US base, but globally it was much more distributed and early in their journey. So I moved over to Berlin from the US, started their global team, essentially working with different countries, showcasing the value that analytics could be possible and dispelling some myths for them. So I used to hear a lot, oh, this can only be done in the US where there is data. There's not much data here in Europe or in Japan and so on. So we picked some problems that we wanted to go through. How do you make business decisions on investment decisions, on how do you change your marketing plans and so on. So we showcased that, showcase value that this could be done globally as well. This could be done at scale, and hence we went through a few transformation stages where we've now established a global team. I have a team that develops global solutions and capabilities for what we call customer powerhouse, which is a commercial transformation journey that we are on, and also established teams across different countries in the markets where they work closely with our business teams, enabling them to make decisions.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I see that you went through a very quick progression here. So you were also the global data science and analytics lead, I see, between March 2018 and May 2019. And then I see an increasing seniority in your role. So how would you describe the evolution of the leadership element in your responsibilities at Bayer?
Yeah. Initially, I had come in to showcase that this works, right? So initially, the Bayer was punting on the fact that is this something that can make draw value at scale, and is this something that we can make decisions on globally? And as I moved into Bayer and as I showcased components, it was really important that we build and showcase leadership on what is possible, deliver value, but then also showcase what is out there and what else can we be going after. So as from 2016 when I joined through till now, we've been through a few different iterations. We've picked certain problems, we've showcased that was value, expanded the problem universe that we were going to work with, expanded the countries that we were working with, and also more importantly, integrated it into how we run our business. Analytics usually, or data science usually, is something that some companies see it as an enabler, and some companies see it as part of how they want to run business. And as a leader, it's important that we get our company to understand where this fits into their larger business decision making process. And if you see it as a core element of how you make decisions, I think the way you approach it will be very different. And that's the journey that we've been on.
And during that journey, what were your main challenges in changing how the organization perceives data? So where did you see the bottlenecks during that 5-year journey?
Yeah, the first and most important thing is that data is distributed everywhere. I think having a good sense of what data do you have is the first problem that we were trying to resolve. Then there's so many problems that you could go after, trying to identify the high value problems that you can still show quick impact on, finding that sweet spot of where you can quickly showcase value so people don't think this is a 2-year program that's running without delivering any value, versus it being something that is still tangible enough to cause an impact for the business, right? So if you save a few grand here, a few grand there, you people might like it, but it might not be something that the business wants to double down on. So finding that right sweet spot of what kind of problems do you want to go after, that was one key thing. So that was the second challenge that we're trying to identify and resolve. What are those value buckets that we should go after? And the third one is we need to build for scale, but we need to be agile in how we learn. Usually I've seen programs where people come with a clear roadmap for how do you want to do things, on a 3-year plan. Well, 3-year goal is great on where you want to reach, but if you know what you're doing in quarter 5 or quarter 7, then where are the learnings in the first 3 quarters, right? So it's important to make sure that you set longer term objectives, but you showcase clear goals that are tangible and can be achieved, and that you learn from. So deliver things quicker and showcase value quicker. I think that's the other piece that we were very focused on, saying we don't we don't create a monster, but we showcase value and keep increasing it.
So when you mentioned finding these value buckets, so what was your method to do that? I understand that you can do this in multiple ways. You can do your own research. You can look inside the company, but also you can sit down with people and actually establish relationships. What was your approach to this?
Yeah, it's very important that you talk to your customers, be it external customers, be it internal stakeholders. It's very important that you understand where they're coming from, what are the challenges that they're trying to resolve in the current business process or in how they make decisions, and then identify solutions out of it. It's so that's been my go-to process always. So we've ran. We sit with business stakeholders, understand what are their priorities for the year or what are their priorities for the quarter. Now, at a certain point of time, we are doing lifecycle management. At a certain point of time, we are trying to launch a new brand. We are trying for we are addressing certain critical business challenges that we see in a certain therapeutic area or so on. So it's important that we identify what those are, and then pick out how analytics could become part of the solutioning of it. How can you make the solution better, smarter, faster by leveraging data? So you fit those goals, and then make sure that the business stakeholders that you're working with are invested in leveraging your outcome at the end of the day. So there's also analytics that you see that is very much a presentation. Everyone is happy about the outcome, but nothing comes out of it at the end of the day. And that's important that we make sure that there is buy-in and also investment, that once you make a certain recommendation, the business teams eventually carry that forward and actually implement it. And then you close the loop by learning from what went great and what didn't go well, that you improve your analytics or analytics outcomes again, right? So building those partnerships connecting goals with leaders on what their business objectives are with what your analytic goals are. I think that was another critical aspect of how we approach this.
How did you create these opportunities to have the conversations? Was there a strategic direction already established in the company, and there was a lot of interest that you could basically ride as a wave? Did the business look at data as a priority, or did you have to create your own opportunities? Did you have to get on these people's calendars? Like, how did that go? How easy was that for you?
Yeah. When I initially came in, we said we wanted to pick our key countries that we were working with and pick one value bucket that we wanted to go after, which was optimizing how we run our marketing engine, right? And that's a mandate that we had to get buy-in for. So both from an executive level, from our pharma board, trying to say that this is what we want to invest in, getting all our country heads aligned, but then also working through with all of our marketing heads in different countries and showcasing what is in it for them, right? So answering that question of what is in it for me and how can this make my life better in what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. That was the process that we went through to identify these opportunities. So it's both getting an executive alignment, showcasing the business value, but also getting your key stakeholders who are eventually going to be your partners in this journey on the longer run, getting them invested in it by having that conversation of what's in it for them.
Mm-hmm. And just a little bit of a tactical depth here to this piece, because it's just so incredibly important and it comes up all the time, to understand that perspective and to understand what's in it for them. What kind of questions do you like to ask to actually identify where you need to aim? Do you have a best practice for this?
Usually I like to go understand what are their business goals. Start with that. What is it that's going to make them successful in their role? I think it's important that we understand and set those as the boundaries, and then understand what are their biggest pain points that are hindering them from achieving these goals. Now, a lot of them might not be things that are analytics related or data related. Some might say, I don't have the right kind of resourcing available to me. There might be many different problems, but that'll help you understand what is the direction in which you're going at. And then you would eventually find common ground around how they leverage data to make those decisions better. Is it something that's going to make things faster for them? Is it something that is going to give them options on what to decide on, which they were relying on their own past experiences, for example? So it's important to connect with how they make decisions, and to understand what are the outcomes that will make them successful, and then finding the common space that you could operate in together on what is the right analysis to go after, or what is the right data that can help them get to those end state outcomes.
Mm-hmm, that makes sense. So once you have the buy-in and you also made sure that the stakeholders are invested in the success of the initiative, did you encounter difficulties during the adoption phase of your solutions being rolled out?
It's always going to be a spectrum, right? So different people coming from different backgrounds are going to have different stages of adoption. So I've had great partners where they were pushing us to get things faster. They were always active. And then I've had partners where you had to showcase value to them on an ongoing basis on how they could leverage some outcomes. If the recommendations are too high level, where they might not be able to make decisions on how do you bring it back to a more tangible outcome on what do I do tomorrow? Right? What do I change tomorrow? What is the change in investment that I do in my next campaign that I've run? Or when should I? Is it worth the change? Is the change management that is needed with the change that you're making in the organizational setup or in how you make decisions worth it with the eventual outcome that you're expected? So there's a lot more of that selling of the outcome that you might have to do rather than just giving them the outcome itself. And I've seen that also in a lot of places. But again, having those true north goals of yeah the same direction that you're going for, which is, are we trying to make this outcome better because you want to be successful in your role, right? Connecting that story is always going to help them come over the line.
And then, so when you are looking for that buy-in, when you are looking for easy adoption methods on the ground as well, how difficult was it for you to translate data? Now, what I mean by this is that obviously data for most business users is still something new, something strange, something that is outside of their usual scope of work and focus. So a lot of data leaders, as we talk to them during their careers, sometimes made the mistake of not really connecting with the business users through their own language. Was this a challenge for you during your time at Bayer?
I see that challenge always on my teams. It's important that we translate outcomes into the language that our business stakeholders understand. You've seen great data scientists, and you might know who I'm talking about when I say they come up with the right recommendation. They've built an amazing model which gives you perfect recommendations, but there is nuance in data science. You're not correct all of the time, right? You need to showcase where this works, where this does not work. But if you lose out on the final message and get lost in those nuances, you lose the stakeholder at a certain amount of time. So say a model is 95% right, 96% right. It's easy for people to say, oh, but it's not right all the time. And let's focus on explaining when is it not correct versus showcasing how do people use the outcome at the end of the day. If you get recommendations 96 times, you're finding the right person to talk to, and 4 times you might have a conversation that might not be the same, might not be the right one. You take that any day, right? So 3 out of 5 conversations that you would not have had are going to result in sales. That's a great start. So 60% success rate is also a great place to start from. You don't need 100% success rate. So translating into how it actually makes a difference for the end stakeholder in what they're trying to achieve, and also how would they use the data outcomes. I think that's a critical skill to have. And I've seen that places where you get good buy-in, the data scientists or the analysts on the team have this innate skill of storytelling, which is important to get them over the line.
So storytelling, we arrived at the meat on the bone, right? Because whenever we talk about these topics, of course, the soft skills come up, and how important the soft skills are, because the technical knowledge, strictly speaking, is not enough anymore to differentiate a data science professional from the pack. Right. And that's where the soft skills come in. If you can combine that with very sound technical know-how, and you have that skill to communicate with the business effectively, well, that's what actually gives you that unfair advantage on the market. And also that's what helps your business to do the same. Now, can you talk a little bit more about the role of storytelling in your career? Because for a lot of people getting into data science, it's still an alien concept. Like I work with data and statistics and technology. How does storytelling come into the picture? So what is your take on that?
Yeah, storytelling is critical to how you sell anything. And as a data scientist or as an analyst, you're selling certain recommendations to your stakeholders. You're convincing your stakeholders to do something slightly differently from what they were doing before, and that takes a certain amount of that takes a certain amount of convincing, and convincing needs good stories. So storytelling has always been critical to how we've progressed, how I have progressed in my career. It was good for me right at the beginning when I said I had my own gig where we did something. I started from selling ideas to actually making them a reality. So we used to run advertising for some small companies where I was doing my schooling. and being able to pitch those sales ideas, trying to get investments and so on. It's that's where it started cultivating the idea of building those right kind of stories. And as I grew along, and as I built teams of analysts and business analysts, data scientists who deliver these messages, I think it was important for me that we build a team that can not only deliver the analytics outcome, but then translate that outcome and then eventually convince stakeholders on why to use that outcome by taking a story along the way. So statistics at its core is trying to make sense out of a large number of data points, but people get convinced by individual stories. When you look at a news report, you see people talking about one kid, how he made a great success out of all the hardship that he had. It is a 1 in a million story. And when you look at the statistics of it, it might be lost in translation, but it's important to get that story to convince people why supporting that is important. And it's the same thing where you need to look at how you make people understand why to use certain analytics outcomes. You need to showcase what kind of changes that it makes in people's lives. Here in pharma, we are trying to make people's lives better. We're trying to make patients' lives better. And at the core of it, that's what our marketing teams want to do. That's at the core of it, that's what our sales teams want to do. How does what you're doing right now help them achieve their goals, and building the story around it to make sure that you showcase what is the true impact you can have is important to get there.
And how big is your team? How big is the group of people that you work with in terms of data science?
The global team is around 60 to 70 people strong, and it's spread across different countries. So we have teams from the US through to Japan, a large team in Europe, Singapore, and so on as well. So across multiple continents, across multiple countries, they work with the business teams in the countries, but also developing global solutions.
So you mentioned that how important it is to make sure that your data science team knows that apart from the technical capabilities, they also need to constantly take the perspective of the business users and then tell these powerful stories. What was the key for you to make sure that they have this capability? So I imagine that was another piece of your leadership role, right? So how did you make sure that everyone is on the same page and that you empower the team so that they can tell powerful stories?
Yeah, I see there to be two critical things to achieve. There's there's the role of what we try to call an analytics translator today, which is essentially someone who's trying to bridge that gap between what kind of problems do you need to solve, and what is the technical solution to it, through to actually how do you have a business stakeholder leverage. So it's important that we showcase what are the capabilities that the teams have. It could be a few roles that need to have this. It could be all of the roles that need to have it. My perception is that everyone on the team to some extent needs to be able to tell the stories. Yes, they need to work around and be part of like a cumulative group that eventually delivers an outcome, but everyone needs to be able to communicate well with business stakeholders on what they're able to achieve. Now within that, I use a left brain, right brain model where I showcase to the teams what are the skill sets that you need to have. It's not only one or the other, it's finding the balance, and you might tilt the balance one way or the other. Not everyone would be that ideal mix, right? But to showcase where are the skill sets that teams need to be developing, and that each individual needs to be working on. If you might be great at a certain aspect, what are the other aspects that you need to get better at, and where will that help you get to? What is it? How is your career trajectory going to look like? I think it's important that we convince them on how these skill sets play into their progression as a professional.
This left brain, right brain split, I find this to be such a useful framework that we even made our logo. That if you look at that,
interesting.
Yeah. So one side is the human brain, that's the right brain, that's responsible for the creative thinking, the big picture thinking, also mainly responsible for what we call hot cognitive triggers in terms of persuasion. And then on the other side, you have the logical, more grounded, more reasonable type of thinking as the left brain. We did represent this with the statistics and the machine in essence, which likes to actually connect the dots and just focus on one thing. And that's equally important in terms of persuasion. That's what we call cold cognition. The only difference what people usually don't understand is that even though both of these processes are critical for a human being to make decisions, the order is not as straightforward. And contrary to popular belief, and it's kind of counterintuitive, first people get emotionally bought into an idea, and then they justify that through statistics and numbers. And the data professionals have this amazing advantage of having the numbers already backing up their case, right? So that part is done, and all you need is a proper emotional framing of that, and that's where the selling comes in. It's so important. So I'm glad you pointed that out. I usually don't like to mention it because I don't want to lead the witness, right?
No, absolutely.
But you hit the spot.
I also like to ask each of my team members to think of all of the key important decisions that they've made in their lives and what actually went first. And you see that it's your emotional buy-in to that decision that actually drives where you go. Obviously, if your rational thinking says, don't do it, there's some cases you might still do it, but it's never the other way around where emotionally you're not bought into it, but you still do it because rationally it makes sense to do. Right. And it's important that you understand how that dynamic works out. And hence, it's important how you frame your stories. It's important that you frame your stories on connecting to empathizing with your stakeholder. At the end of the day, if you're asking someone to take the effort to change something or do something with the outcomes that you have, you need to empathize with them on how you're able to help make their lives better and tell them the story of or showcase what can change.
And this is so true. And I always bring the simple example of you shopping for a pair of shoes on Amazon, right? And you just scroll through and suddenly you see a shoe that just captures your imagination. It looks slick. Maybe there's a logo there that you're already emotionally attached to. Let's say the Nike logo. And then you look at the shoe, you look at the images of someone like you wearing it, running in it. You see yourself out in the park and you want the shoe. Emotionally, you would like the shoe to be in your possession and to see yourself as that person on the image. Now, before you make the decision though, especially if it's a pricey shoe, you will need to back it up with some reason. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to start browsing and what kind of material is the sole made of? What kind of new technology did they use to make sure that the heel of the shoe will be super smooth when you run in difficult terrain? All that stuff that is important for you to justify the decision, but you already made a decision before through emotional buy-in. So even if you look at the different questions that people ask in the comments, it's usually about that kind of trivia that they already want to buy the shoe. They just want to make sure that their decision is also reasonable. And what we found on the data leadership level is that once you tune into this and once you understand it, well, first you just understand the concept, but once you start realigning the form of your communication along these lines, suddenly things just start to happen, right? You experience less resistance from key stakeholders and people just become more interested in whatever you have to say. So that's one of those things that it seems to be kind of like a heady concept, left brain, right brain, creative thinking, logical thinking, but it's incredibly practical if you apply it the right way. So again, I'm glad you brought it up. And what are you guys working on now at Bayer that you're excited about? What's next for you?
So we are at a pretty interesting part of our journey. We've showcased that a customer powerhouse, like I mentioned, it's a commercial transformation program. I call it a commercial transformation program because it's essentially changing how we run our operations across different countries, making it more agile, making it more data-driven, making sure that it's a truly cross-functional exercise across countries. And it's not just, all of these might sound like buzzwords, but if you hear our teams on the ground talk about what has changed, they feel happy about what they're doing. They feel connected to the stakeholders, connected to the customer. And I think the perception about how this can happen, how data can help generate value has changed into, hey, I love doing this. This is great, and this actually makes me understand uh, my colleagues better, helps me understand my customer better. So we are in that journey right now. We are scaling this up across different countries. So more and more countries, more and more brands is something that we are trying to drive this as, and also we're pretty strongly developing our data science capabilities internally. So how do we focus on making use of the data? Yes, you're never going to have the perfect data landscape that you want to work with, but as a data scientist, you need to be able to make use of that data and be able to solve the problem at hand. And now building that data science capabilities in house, we are bringing the right people's right with the right skill sets, but also creating the ecosystem for them to work in a certain operating model with our countries, or work in a certain way of making decisions with our countries, where they feel part of the overall way we do business, basically. And that's exciting. We're going through that journey right now, showcasing value across brands. And then there are a few fundamental things that we're also trying to enable. How do we get ahead of the curve from uh, the next set of challenges that data science will bring to the table? A lot of the things that we've seen, how do we make analytics more reusable? How do we make sure that we spend less amount of time creating analytics, but spend more amount of time helping our stakeholders make decisions, use the analytics eventually, generate value rather than generate analytics, right? And that's where we are trying to figure out how we have our teams move from one stage to the other in the value cycle. That doesn't mean that creating analytics is less important, but how can you get this done faster? How do you make this more of a DevOps model, like people call it? How do we make ML ops the reality, while you can then start implementing business value out of it, and then preparing for the next wave of business challenges that Bayer is going through. We're at a pretty interesting stage of our journey of what we call True North in pharma, and that's something that's very exciting for us.
And when it comes to, for example, pharma, so how do you think working with the data in a highly regulated industry like pharma, what kind of unique challenges does that pose from your perspective?
It's challenges and opportunity at the same time. I think there are places where the amount of data that we have is regulated. What we can do with that data is regulated, but the kind of problems that you're trying to solve from an analytics perspective, it's a gold mine of opportunity on how you leverage data, how you use the minimal data that you have to create the impact that you want to have, and trying to figure out methodologies that solve those problems are pretty interesting challenges for data scientists to be resolving. I think also from a business perspective on what the outcomes can be. How do you get your drug to the patients that need it the most? How do you identify those patients? How do you make sure that the patients and our customers understand the value of the treatment at hand? These are all questions that are pretty powerful in the impact that it can have, and trying to make sure we use the right data to get those answers, I think is a great problem to be solving.
And a lot of people call the 2020s already the decade of data, with all these opportunities and the risks involved for all businesses, not just the highly regulated ones. What trends are you most excited about now when it comes to data and analytics in the corporate world?
Yeah, I think, like you rightly said, most people are talking about data right now. I think that's one battle won. A decade ago, you might have seen much less executives talking about data, talking about analytics as something that is relevant. Being able to cross that bridge of making sure people understand the value in it, I think is done. But now comes the important aspect of showcasing that. How do you showcase where you captured that value, baking it into how businesses want to steer, which direction businesses want to steer towards. I think that's that's the key theme that I'm seeing. How, if I talk about pharma, where do we see digital health solutions going? Where do we see how do we see personalized therapies that are coming to the table? How do we manage our commercialization engine better? I think there are a lot of problems there that that I see trends on, where companies are investing heavily in, and also trying to transform the processes, the age-old processes around pharma that used to be existing. And through this COVID transformation journey, I would call it, the digital adoption has increased by leaps and bounds. How physicians in different geographies are able to now use digital tools to make their patients' lives better, versus where they might not have thought about using digital tools a year ago. I think that has changed widely, and that gives even more opportunities for us to impact patients' lives and make sure that everyone gets the health support they need.
Srini, thank you for your time. This was a very interesting conversation, especially around the storytelling aspect, but just in general. And what would be your final word of advice for future data leaders? Anyone who's looking to go through a similar progression like you had at Bayer, what would you recommend them pay attention to? What should they focus on and prioritize in order to succeed?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One, make sure that you identify the right stakeholders and build that relationship with them on what journey, how you can help them transform the journey. I think building those partners within the organization is super critical to showcasing that value. The second one I would say is make sure that you build a team around you that can help scale the impact that you want to have. Be identifying the right kind of talent is super critical. Being able to identify people who share the same vision towards what you're wanting to achieve, but also people who you can rely on to communicate the value, to tell the stories that you want them to be telling, to make sure that people actually see the value that you see in data. I think that's going to be super critical. So those are the two big things I'd say. Personally, you need to be good at what you do, yes, but you need to also be good at how you make sure people understand that.
Srini, great insights. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with our community. And we hope to see you back on the show someday. I'm sure you have a lot more war stories to share.
It was good being here, and look forward to that conversation again.